The first time my sister introduced herself as the founder, I thought it was a joke, honestly. A weird joke. We were standing at a networking event downtown. Small crowd, expensive suits, people pretending not to check each other's name tags every 5 seconds. And then I heard her say it, smiling confidently. Yes, I built the company from the ground up. Built. Interesting word, because technically, she joined almost 2 years after I started it, but the people around her nodded immediately. Impressed, interested, and my sister Claire, she looked completely comfortable, taking credit for work she never did. That part shocked me most. Not the lie, the ease of it, like she'd repeated the story enough times that even she believed it now. I remember staring at her from across the room, quietly, waiting for her to correct herself eventually. She didn't, not once. Instead, she kept talking, confident, polished, professional. Meanwhile, I stood there holding my own drink like some employee listening to a CEO presentation. Looking back now, that should have been the moment I stopped trusting her completely. But family has a strange way of making betrayal feel temporary at first, explainable, fixable. So I ignored it. Big mistake. The company started in my apartment 3 years earlier. Tiny setup, 1 laptop, 1 folding table, and months of surviving on coffee and panic. Nobody believed it would work, especially my family. My parents called it a phase. Claire laughed openly whenever I talked about expansion plans. You always dream too big, she used to say. Funny, because later she loved telling people how we built the business together. We. That word started appearing everywhere eventually, at interviews, meetings, events. The more successful the company became, the more singular my work suddenly became shared history. At first, I corrected people politely. She joined later. I started the company myself originally, but Claire always handled it smoothly. Too smoothly. Oh my God, obviously she started it. She'd laugh, then immediately add, but I helped turn it into what it is now. And somehow, people always remembered her version more, because confidence changes perception. A lot, especially in business. Claire understood attention naturally. She knew how to command rooms, how to sound important, how to speak confidently, even when she barely understood operational details. Meanwhile, I focused on actually running the company. That was my second mistake, because while I built systems, Claire built perception, and perception becomes dangerous when left unchecked long enough. One evening after an investor dinner, I confronted her directly for the first time. Why do you keep introducing yourself like you founded the company? She looked genuinely surprised. That part mattered, because manipulative people often act offended when questioned. I never said that. You literally said it tonight. Claire rolled her eyes dramatically. You're being sensitive again. There it was. Not accountability. Redirection. Always redirection. I stared at her quietly, then asked carefully, do you want people thinking you built this? She crossed her arms immediately. I helped build it. Not the same answer. That mattered too, because guilty people answer nearby questions instead of direct ones. You joined after the company already existed. I replied calmly. Claire laughed softly. And it exploded after I joined. Interesting. Not entirely false, but intentionally misleading, because success after someone arrives doesn't mean they created it. And deep down, she knew that. The conversation ended badly, like most conversations with Claire eventually did, because she had a talent for making accountability sound unreasonable. By the following year, the problem became bigger. Much bigger. Articles started mentioning Claire before me. Conference invitations arrived addressed only to her. One magazine even called her the visionary founder behind the company's rapid growth. That article almost made me physically sick, not because strangers misunderstood, because Claire never corrected them, not once, and eventually, silence becomes participation. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I walked into the office conference room unexpectedly and froze immediately. Claire was presenting to potential investors, large investors, the kind capable of changing company ownership structures permanently. I stayed near the doorway, quietly, listening, and within seconds, I realized something terrifying. Claire wasn't just taking credit anymore. She was positioning herself as majority control. That's why I maintain final strategic authority, she told them confidently. Authority, final authority. I almost laughed from disbelief, because legally, Claire only owned 10% of the company. I stayed outside the conference room for almost 30 seconds, just listening, because honestly, part of me still hoped I misunderstood. Maybe Claire phrased things badly, maybe the investors assumed too much, but then she said it again. I've been steering the company vision personally for years. Steering, personally, years. Every sentence carefully designed to erase me slowly. And the worst part, the investors believed her. Of course they did. Confidence is persuasive when nobody challenges it publicly. Claire stood at the front of the room, effortlessly. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect performance. Meanwhile, the actual founder stood outside the glass wall, like a stranger watching someone steal their identity in real time. Looking back now, that moment hurt less because of the business, and more because she truly believed she could replace me completely. That realization changes how you see someone forever. I walked into the room quietly. Nobody noticed immediately. Claire continued talking smoothly, which is why I maintain primary executive control over expansion strategy. There it was again. Control. Always control. One investor finally noticed me standing near the back. His expression shifted slightly, confused. Then Claire turned around too, and for the first time in months, her confidence cracked instantly. Tiny crack, but enough. Oh, she smiled quickly. There you are. Interesting phrasing. Not introduction, not acknowledgement. Just discomfort disguised as casualness. The investors looked between us uncertainly. Claire recovered fast though. Too fast. She handles operations, Claire explained smoothly. Operations. I almost laughed, because apparently the founder now handled operations inside her own company. One older investor frowned slightly. I thought she founded the company. Silence. Small silence, but dangerous. Claire smiled tightly. We built it together. There it was. The safer version. Not technically false enough to challenge immediately, but still dishonest. Very dishonest. I looked directly at her, then calmly asked, Together? The room changed instantly, because suddenly everyone realized this conversation wasn't aligned. Investors noticed tension fast, especially ownership tension. Claire crossed her arms subtly. You know what I mean. No, I did know what she meant. That was the problem. I walked toward the conference table slowly, then placed one folder gently in front of the investors. Corporate ownership documents. Official, signed, current, and suddenly the atmosphere changed completely. One investor opened the folder first, then paused. Another leaned closer, and within seconds, the room became silent, real silent, because paperwork speaks louder than confidence eventually. 90%? One investor asked slowly. I nodded once. Yes. Claire immediately laughed nervously. Oh my God, ownership percentages don't reflect leadership contributions. Interesting. Not denial, minimization, because suddenly she couldn't challenge the facts anymore, only reinterpret them. I leaned back slightly, then calmly replied, "They usually reflect who built the company." That landed hard, especially because nobody interrupted it. Claire's face tightened immediately, and for the first time in years, she looked uncertain publicly. Looking back now, that was the exact moment perception collapsed, not because people discovered Claire lied, because they realized how intentionally she framed the truth. Investors hate uncertainty, but they hate hidden power structures even more. One woman across the table adjusted her glasses carefully. So, who actually has final authority here? Simple question. Devastating timing. Claire opened her mouth first, but I answered calmly before she could. I do. Silence. Heavy silence. Because suddenly, every previous statement Claire made sounded different retroactively, misleading, manipulative, calculated, and the investors knew it. You could see it spreading across their faces quietly. Claire tried recovering again. "You're making this sound dramatic." There it was. That word, dramatic. Manipulative people love describing exposure that way, as if truth itself created the problem instead of deception. "No," I replied calmly. "You made it dishonest." That hit harder, because unlike Claire, I wasn't performing anymore. I was clarifying. Big difference. One investor closed the folder slowly, then looked directly at Claire. "Why didn't you disclose the ownership structure properly?" Direct question. No escape route. Claire smiled tightly again. "I didn't think percentages mattered that much internally." Wrong answer. Very wrong answer. Because in investment meetings, ownership matters more than almost anything. And deep down, she knew that. The room felt colder suddenly. Professional.